An eyeball covered by a red no sign spins into view. White text on a black background reads, Mason in the dark. A blind man's journey through the wacky world of reading, writing, and other silly bollocks. Brought to you from beyond the black screen. Cut to black. Hello everyone. Mason here. How you doing? What inspired my story in Half-Human Heroes, a fantasy anthology? I've been thinking about this since Jeremy Fee uploaded a fantastic video explaining what inspired his short story, as well as the one that was included in the Stygian collection. At this point, a few of the contributors have done the same thing, and I've really enjoyed hearing what they have to say, so I thought I'd have a go. The problem is, I don't actually know what inspired Dishonoured in Death. I'll be honest, at first I had no idea what I was going to do for my story. At some point last year I wrote what was, at the time, an excerpt from a crime story. It was just a snippet really, something that I wrote down in case I wanted to use it in future. It focused on an unnamed protagonist, the woman. A mother whose son had been murdered by thugs, and she was going to punish them. I saved it and called it P is for Payback, which I think sounded cooler in my head than it does out loud. To be honest, I more or less forgot about it, until I needed some inspiration so that I could submit something to Half-Human Heroes and started dipping into my reserves. After all, that's what they're there for. In the original version of the excerpt, the woman was getting ready in an old, run-down gym, preparing for a night of violence. The tone was jaded and cynical. That was where the inspiration kicked in. I started to wonder what it would be like if I tried to write a hard-boiled, noir-esque, urban fantasy crime story. With that goal in mind, I started tinkering. I found it fairly easy to repurpose the excerpt, and I really didn't have to change that much. With the exception of a few minor tweaks here and there, the way it appears in Dishonoured in Death is mostly the same as the way I found it. I wanted to keep the core concept. A protagonist who is so consumed by grief that they feel disconnected from their identity, who feels dead inside, whose only purpose is vengeance. The woman became a dwarf rather than a regular human because I've always had a soft spot for those sturdy, mountain mining badasses. They never seem to get as much love as the elves, and I don't think that's very fair. At the time, I'd just read John Gwyn's Shadow of the Gods. I really liked the idea of making my dwarves feel like a cross between bikers and Vikings. I know that sounds strange, but that's genuinely what my thought process was. In fact, that dynamic sort of illustrates what I was going for with Dishonoured in Death. I wanted to write something that felt like a marriage between the old and new. Something that employed that high fantasy vibe, but with a gritty modern twist. Basically, I wanted to write a piece of thriller fantasy. In the original excerpt, the loved one that the woman lost was her son, but when it became Dishonoured in Death, it was her twin brother instead. Everything seemed to snap into place for me once I made that change. All of a sudden, I understood why the woman was doing what she was doing, and how it would end. The phrase, Dishonoured in Death, came to me pretty quickly after that, and once I decided what that actually meant, it was full steam ahead. So now I knew what themes I wanted to explore, where I wanted it to go, and what I wanted to say with the story. After that, the process was entirely discovery writing. I won't lie, I'm intensely proud because I feel that I nailed exactly what I wanted to achieve with Dishonoured in Death. I've never felt more creative. Despite always struggling with it in the past, the world building just presented itself to me, necessitated by the storytelling and the vibe I wanted to capture. I tried to not overthink things, to just switch off my brain and have fun. In the end, that made the process so much easier for me. The only part that gave me trouble was the climax. In my head, I thought it would be a good idea to shatter the tension that had been building. I tried to do this by having the confrontation between the woman and her adversary end in one blow. I thought this would be dramatic and impactful. I thought it would make a statement, but it didn't. It was actually severely underwhelming and it felt quite anticlimactic. I think the way that I approached it in the final draft was a lot better. It felt more personal, there was more emotion to it, and I think the underlying message was much clearer. There's so much that I love about my writing in this story. I really like the metaphor I employed as the woman climbs onto her motorbike, treating it as if it's her mighty steed. As she rides through Dagrock, the passage, in my opinion, has an almost poetic rhythm to it. My favourite part to write was the final scene. As much as my imposter syndrome kicks in and I feel like a pretentious wanker for saying it, that's where I got to go full Tolkien mode. I don't really want to say why I feel that way because it would probably spoil the impact of experiencing it in the moment, but I felt emotional whilst writing that scene and I was proud of it. To me, there was something poignant and beautiful about it. I didn't cry whilst writing it, but I think I probably could have, and I might come close when I finally narrate it. My question of the day is, what element of the fantasy genre, be it a race, theme or setting, do you feel is underrated or underrepresented? Have you enjoyed this video? If so, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. And if you don't press at least one of them, I'll banish you to the dungeons of the King's Mountain. And believe me, that's not somewhere you want to be. If you've got thoughts to share, or you fancy a chat, then you know where the comment section is, and you can find the links to all my social media in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now I'm off, and you should have a good 'un.